Moment of silence, everyone, if you will. The Borg, May 16th, 1989 to April 20th, 2023. Had a good run. Welcome to that, back, everybody. I'm Ryan Murphy, and thank you for welcome to Real Time for the Real Everyday Movie Fan. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ryan Murphy, and
I'm James Sheridan.
there you go. That's how we do it. I'm just flustered. It's okay. So a thing happened today.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's talk about that thing.
yeah. Usually I let you go first. I got this. So I had a really interesting moment today, or in the wee hours of the morning when I was texting my friend about the episode and felt this like come down, like my hair's all messed up, but that's okay. I felt this like come down of like I was like really high. It is 4:20. Um, no, but I had this like really like euphoric euphoria about me, and I was coming down from that, and I was like, I don't know if I was thinking about like the hunger and the bad things in the world going on today, disease and poverty, or if I just didn't want to go to work that day. I don't know, but like just something reminded me like, oh yeah, the world's like a dark and cruel and uncomfortable place. And I was like, shit, man, like I forgot about that. For like the first time in like 20 years I wasn't thinking that for like several minutes, because this episode had just had that sort of euphoric effect on me that it was really weird experience. I was like, oh yeah, life sucks. Oh shit. And yeah. So I like this episode. Um, we'll go back to the very beginning when James and I started this. I was like, I really want to do this because I'm really excited. James and Josh and I did a countdown of our top most hyped things for 2023, and this was at the top of mine because I was born in the year 1987. And Star Trek: The Next Generation debuted 2 months before I was born. And so I've always felt, maybe it's because of that that I've always been a big fan, and maybe that's led to a feeling of kinship with it. And when this was happening, I was like, I feel like my whole life's been leading up to this. Kind of sounds weird, right? But I feel like my whole life's been leading up to this. Certainly for the past 20 years since Nemesis, and we've had to wait 20 years for this over it's just over 20 years for this to happen. And so it was my most hyped thing. And I was like, it's just Star Trek The Next Generation Season 8. I had no idea how, to the extent it was going to be Star Trek The Next Generation Season 8. I think Terry Matalas was thinking much more in that direction than I was. I had hoped the Borg were going to come back. I didn't necessarily think it, especially when the trailers dropped. I had no idea that Data and the Enterprise D were going to come in.
Yeah.
Uh, and so here we are. We've that all that being said, you and I have both shared our frustrations with this season. Like this season has not gone down sort of the way we'd hoped. And yet sent you a gift this morning of a gymnast sticking the landing. And yeah. Um so that we'll get into this more specific thoughts later. I actually do have one big gripe. But yeah, your thoughts. Did you enjoy this as much as I did?
No, unfortunately. There's a lot to love about this episode, and there's a lot of great moments, and there's a lot of stuff that, like, I have a whole checklist of things that worked well for me. The problem is that this is a continuation of the rest of the season where it doesn't work for me in sort of like a long form narrative and like season long sort of story. And it's apparent all over the place where like the story just isn't working for me. A lot of the characters just aren't working for me, and this didn't save it from that. I'd hope that maybe like a really good finale could kind of like make up for a lot of that. And there's again a lot to love. There's a lot of little moments, but I feel like those little moments kind of stand alone in like my love for them. Whereas like this is just kind of a reminder that I've been wholly disappointed in this season. I was talking to a buddy of mine who is a huge Trekkie who like has watched every episode multiple times and has been begging me for years to watch the newer series. Um, and he loves this. He says it's the greatest season of Trek in years, and I'm like, are you joking? Because this has been one of the most arduous journeys I've gone on. There's been some highlights for sure, and there's been some great episodes for sure. Again, going back to previous episodes, like one of the highlights for me was seeing Ensign Rowe again, or Commander Rowe, or Captain Rowe, or whatever she was now. Just seeing that return was great, and it took me back, getting closure on that story. And there's little things like that in there. Watching what's his name, the prick, grow as a character over the season, not really grow, but at least getting opportunity for growth, and then showing some sort of like non-prick sides to his personality. His whole backstory with Wolf 359 was kind of fascinating. But again, my story, sort of series long gripes remain, especially the last minute introduction of the Borg as the main villains. They've been teasing it a little bit, but I don't feel like they earned that sort of introduction to them. I don't think the foreshadowing was Borg specific enough, and I understand that the tie into Picard specifically and his connection to the Borg, and to me that they didn't kind of utilize that well enough, and it didn't sort of work for me the way I think it probably worked for a lot of people. At the end of the day, this is sort of a father-son story, and at no point did I really feel like there was any sort of love lost, or like there was nothing between them that really made me feel like that bond compels me to want them to continue that relationship, kind of thing. And at the end of the day, like it just ends up being like, I don't want harm to come to Jack, because like Beverly clearly cares for him, and Picard's coming around to caring for him, but like I don't care about Jack specifically, and like
Sure.
this episode specifically makes, like, it requires you to care about him, and it's like I don't feel like they've given me enough to like this character, and it's like, and then again, like we spent so much of this season just wasting time on shit that didn't fucking matter, and establishing an entire like plot line with villains that in the end don't fucking matter. The Borg are almost completely out of character at this point. I realize that they're desperate and trying to find some sort of like last minute gambit, and yes, the last minute gambit was a huge threat, but it still feels like the Borg are like sacrificing everything about them that makes them, threatening, villainous characters throughout the series. That they're more of like a force to be reckoned, like a force of nature kind of thing, as opposed to like, cartoonish villains. And in this, they're just like outright cartoonish villains. Absolutely loved having Alice Krieg back in the role of the Borg Queen. That woman
What's the voice though? I found that out. She's only the voice.
Yeah,
There's
she's
a
only the
fourth
voice.
actress. Now the fourth actress to play the Borg Queen, who did the body for some reason, but they wanted Alice Krige to come back
But
and voice and do the
the
voice.
voice is all you need, because
Yeah,
it pulls me right back to First Contact
first
and
contact.
the end of
And you got my
Voyager and
text. She
whatnot.
said it. She said the line.
And it
I
was
want to.
great great to see her. Great for all of these little moments where we get this nostalgia, and we get to like revisit characters and places and events that mean so much. But like, those aren't a story. Those aren't building a story, and the story they did build didn't satisfy me. I'm probably in the minority. I'm probably one of the few people who feel this way, because everyone I talk to seems to love this. But
Welcome to my world.
it didn't work for me, and it's a real bummer, because while I wasn't as excited as the rest of you guys about this, I did get kind of sucked into the hype around, this is going to be, the last hurrah of the TNG crew. And it's like, sure, eventually we'll get to the TNG crew, and we'll get to them actually reuniting in like the last 3 episodes, and the rest of it will just be a meandering mess with characters that I just don't give a shit about. Okay, so we got 3 episodes of what I was promised, and they were lackluster, building on a season of lackluster, and the finale didn't deliver anything to kind of break that. That said, lots of great little moments. Love the opening where you see the nebula that you see at the very beginning of the original TNG opening, and I was waiting for the theme music and Picard to come in, because we'd said that last week, that it would be great to have that sort of throwback of Picard saying, space, the final frontier, yada yada yada. President Chekhov was a nice little Anton Chekhov,
That was
both a nod to Pavel Chekhov, but also Anton, whose last name is escaping me, who played Chekhov in the Abrams films, who
Oh,
passed away.
I didn't think that was what it was. I thought it was because Anton Chekhov is playwright. I'm pretty sure. Like he's a very famous person, and every time someone says Anton Chekhov, all I ever think of is Pavel Chekhov. So I thought it was a just a
It
play
could
on
have
like,
been.
well, maybe
I read
Pavel.
it as a nod to him because unfortunately he did pass away soon after the
Yeah.
third film, and was one of the more entertaining parts of those films. Worf's little threesome was hilarious. Worf fucking passing out and snoring on the bridge of the Enterprise had me in stitches. Data piloting the Battlestar Galactica through the second Death Star sequence was outstanding. I loved that. I
Did you
know
not
it's
think that there was a moment where it felt like you were watching Return of the Jedi when he
and
was
the entire
skating?
sequence was Return of the Jedi, and I'm like, I don't even care that they're ripping it off. I love this so much because, again, as I've said so many times, space battles mean a lot to me, and they're so underutilized. Like, I don't mean like Star Trek space battles where it's just two ships passing in the water kind of thing, firing phasers at each other. I mean like fucking like
Dogfighting, yeah,
flying and like
yeah.
the like
Which we've
breakneck
never seen
maneuvers
the
that these do.
Enterprise D do, and that was amazing
No,
to watch. And the
and
fact that
that's
it's a Borg cube that it's doing it against was just
not
this
only that,
is
but the Enterprise D is this like giant fucking fat ass like ship. It's a boat of a ship that like is not super maneuverable. This isn't the Millennium Falcon and a couple of X-wings flying through there. It's a big consular ship. Like I thought it was an amazing sequence. That was one of the like huge highlights for me. I wish there was more of that. Again, I dislike the whole. I'm just looking through my notes here, so this might be a little all over the place, but my thoughts are scattered, so I'm just kind of checking them off as I go. The Borg defeat felt so lackluster because they were basically just this crippled entity of like, yes, they were still a
yeah.
threat,
That
but it
was gonna
was
be my gripe. Yeah,
like it feels like you're beating up a weakened foe, and it's like this doesn't feel like a satisfying end to the Borg story. It's just kind of like it's this limping, weak sort of like enemy from 50 years ago who's too old and too weak to actually do anything. Yes, they're a threat, but it's like I don't feel the same satisfaction from defeating them that I would if it was like in their prime. Whereas like I feel like the way Voyager kind of left it felt like that to me was a little more of like a satisfying defeat because that was the Borg at their prime when they were
mm,
like and like not just at the prime but like the heart of the Borg itself, not like an offshoot where they'd gone several quadrants away to like battle with Earth. This was like the heart of the Borg and everything. um yeah, defeating them just didn't work for me. The sort of this take on the Borg didn't work for me. The way they kind of sacrifice aspects of the Borg that made the Borg interesting to me. um Beverly as a tactical officer was a great little tidbit because of course she's had experience on other ships and whatnot, learning how to use systems. She's not just a doctor anymore, but like just how like precise she was with her shots and all that and being able to like hit all the right targets was a great little bit. And then moving towards the end, the little tidbits at the end where they're doing the denouement. They renamed the Titan the Enterprise G. Little on the nose, but I still love it because it's continuing the Enterprise. I don't care. The continuation of the name is important to me. Um, it's kind of sad that it wasn't a new ship because each time they
yeah.
introduce a new Enterprise, it's usually a new ship, with the exception of the Enterprise A and this refit Enterprise D, where it's like they're taking an old ship and renaming it, but it's like that's because it's the same build as a legacy ship that was destroyed. This is a ship that already existed and they're just renaming it Enterprise, and it feels like sure, I still enjoy it. Captain Seven was a great little bit. Seeing Tuvok, I was very happy with because I'd said earlier I wanted to see more of either the DS9 crew or the Voyager crew, and because they'd already introduced Tuvok in this, seeing him rescued and seeing him the one who promoted Seven, because as it was discussed earlier in our little reviews, that Tuvok's relationship with Seven was very important to her growth as a person. And then the ending, the last scene, was note fucking perfect of them ending on playing poker, because poker was such an ongoing important thing within the series. And my memory is hazy of the last episode, but I believe the last episode ended on them playing poker as well, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I was actually at first I was a little bit like, really, they're doing that again? All good things already ended that way. And then I thought about it some more, and I was like, no, that's the only way to end it. And
Yeah.
if they come back for a third time, or this is actually the third time because Nemesis was kind of the second finale, if they come back for a fourth time and say this is the ending now, they should end it on poker. And if they come back for a fifth time, you're like, no, no, really, this is it.
You have
End it
to.
on poker. it's just the only that's the only way. So yeah.
And then
Anything
there was
else?
that
Now that
little
you've on my
and
dreams.
well, there's also the end credit scene, which I don't know what they're doing with that, where Q
Oh, you
comes
don't know? You haven't
back.
heard?
No, are they doing a new
Okay, well,
series?
well, they want to. Terry Matalas has said like multiple times, like Paramount has not approved it. Paramount has not approved it. We want is he's
Okay,
calling it Star Trek Legacy, and I've never heard of a series that we were made aware of, even the name of it, before it was greenlit, and
yeah,
just like showrunner being like, "Hey, I want to do this." And but he's
that
been saying for a while now that he wants to make a show called Star Trek Legacy, and that really started to be um, come into focus as at the end of this episode where they get a new Enterprise, they get a captain. Jack's a crew member. I'm like, okay, this is all for Star Trek Legacy.
but
So
he,
the point of Star Trek Legacy is to sort of be Star Trek: The Next Generation, where it's
yeah,
another Enterprise. So it'll open up with Seven saying space, the final
that would
frontier.
be dope. I'd be down for that.
Everything about that sounds intriguing, except that Raffi is the first officer. I just, oh, like
But
I might not.
even weirder, Jack is the counselor, and I'm like, what does he know about counseling? Like, put him in tactical, put him in like engineer, I don't know, put him somewhere that like he can learn stuff, but like that's a specialty. You have to go through a lot of training to get to that point. It's not something you could just pick up by doing it on the shit. Like, I know they want him in the third seat, but it's like I don't understand that field promotion. But the other moment with the Q thing that made me laugh was, I don't know if this was intentional, but it felt like it was a throwback to Back to the Future, where Jack had said, "But you're dead," and he says very specifically, "You're not thinking literally." Which to me, I heard the entire time as Doc thinking, "Marty,
You're
you're
not
not
thinking,
thinking fourth dimensionally,"
yeah.
which made me laugh. Probably not what they intended, but it did ring some bells for me. So
Okay. Well, so here's my thoughts going in what I loved and what I disliked about this. Um, First of all, the Chekhov thing. I love the fact that Walter Koenig is still getting to play in the sandbox of Star Trek. That's kind of amazing. I mean, that's a lifetime of Trek, right there. Um, but when we were going into this, I mean, I was very hyped. I mean, I was wondering when you were watching this episode if the thought ever entered your head, Ryan got his wish. Ryan got what he wanted because I've been saying for this whole time, like when we didn't know it was going to be the Borg, I was like, it should be the Borg, it should be the Borg, blah blah blah. They're the Lex Luthor to Jean-Luc Picard's Superman. They're the they're that's what it should be. Like they're the Joker to their Batman. And then I also said, not only should it be the Borg, but it should be an end to the Borg. They should defeat them once and for all.
yeah,
And when we got to the last episode, I was like, it's great. It's great that it's the Borg, but they're not going to defeat them once and for all. There's no time for that. We have 44 minutes to go. And we were both perplexed. Like, first of all, this should have been episode 5, the Enterprise D took off in. I don't know
yeah.
how they're going to wrap everything up in an hour. They did it. I thought it was, I didn't think it felt rushed or anything. And I was so I thought, how are they going to do it? And that's the one area I am disappointed in because the Borg were basically emaciated, and it was basically like, let's go fight the Borg. What started 35 years ago ends tonight. They get there and like, oh, that's hard to look at. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
everyone look away. Put them out of their
It's
misery.
like,
All
yeah,
right.
it's like putting down an old dog. It's like it's not a threat. I mean, it is a threat, but
they
like it's
they just fly in and blow it up, and I mean the only real thing that stretches it out longer than that is they have to go in and save Jack. Fucking Jack is the only thing making this take longer than 5 minutes. Like, "Ha, we found you!" Bam. Which
yeah,
that was my complaint about First Contact. Even was as much as you love First Contact, my complaint is like the Borg are back, and this time there may be no stopping the. All right, what's for dinner? So the Borg kind of like have been this huge threat for so long, but they kind of keep getting their asses kicked a lot. But and not only the fact that they were kind of a weak emaciated foe, but also that I didn't understand that because is that having to do with the end episode of Voyager? Is that where
yeah.
that happened?
So like
So I forgot about that
future
entirely.
Janeway came back and gave um current Janeway some sort of like retrovirus thing that she released into the Borg, which weakened them. Not only that, but because of this whole biological aspect of them, and the like the shift to them being trying to like develop biologically and like through procreation rather than assimilation. They sort of abandon the technological aspect to a degree. And so like a lot of them like they were just letting like the biological aspect of certain Borg just kind of decay to like bolster what was left of the current Borg kind of thing. So again, I didn't like any of that. Like to me,
Yeah,
that's not how the Borg
it's
operate, and it's such a weird sort of like
well, like you said, they're desperate and everything, but so they hired a bounty hunter to go. That could have been it. They didn't need the whole like tragic backstory of Vadic and all this sort of stuff they threw in there. It's like in the end, she's just a bounty hunter who's there for Jack. She could have caught Jack in the second episode, and we could have gotten this shit done in three or four episodes. You
one of the
know,
biggest tragedies is that we get this gorgeous recreation of the Enterprise D bridge and like the visual like the visual effects of the actual Enterprise D flying and everything, and it's like we only get it for like an hour and like 10 minutes between two
yeah.
episodes, and it's like if we had got that in the fifth episode, like they spent all this time and money building a bridge for basically one episode, a reveal in one episode, and it's like no, give me more. I want to see more of this.
Well, the
And
other
then
thing the other reason that bugged me is that not only do they kind of kick a puppy, but the reason the Borg are emaciated is because of someone else. It's because of Jamie. It's because of Voyager. And so that takes away from this being there. It's like if you get to Superman 3 and he goes to fight Lex Luthor and they're like, yeah, Batman already took him out. You just have to kick him. Like, oh, okay.
but at the same
So
time,
like
like
it's not their victory in that sense. And
no,
yeah.
but and you keep saying like you wanted this to be like the sort of final hurrah between Picard and the Borg, and his confrontation, and like to a degree sort of like the emotional sort of like ramifications of him
Closure.
confronting the Borg and getting closure and all that. And I feel like that's what First Contact was him sort of getting closure on that and moving on from that, and him dealing with the consequences of his anger of that, and like very deliberately, like we see him in the holodeck sequence where he turns off the safety protocols and not only shoots one Borg but is like mercilessly trying to murder the other one because he had so much pent up anger. And like through the course of that story, it's about him trying to come to grips with what happened to him, put that aside, and deal with the actual danger that's in front of them. And I feel like that story thematically put all of that stuff aside. So going back to them now is just sort of rehashing all of that just for the sake of his son. And it's like
Just for
I
his
feel
son.
no, but like, really just for his son. Like it has nothing to do with him or his character development. It has to do with him forcing himself back into his trauma for his son. And it's like, again, I don't buy the relationship between them being strong enough that, like of course he's going to go back and do that, but it's like I don't feel like the show earned that moment, and I don't feel like there was need to go back and retread that material because it had already been done so well in the past. We'd already had that closure. We'd already moved on and let Picard, kind of do his thing for two more lackluster movies and then two more lackluster seasons. This didn't need to happen. I don't feel like there was any purpose in doing that like there was this lingering thread that they never sort of dealt with, and I wanted to see them deal with, like the way the Rose story came in. It feels like they left that on a bit of a cliffhanger, and like I know she was supposed to be in DS9, and then she didn't want to be in DS9, so that story never really got resolved, and we got closure with that in this episode. That's what this should have been. I don't think that they earned that. Maybe other people feel differently. I don't know, but to me, that didn't work. And I don't feel like they built that up well enough. And like that's why I'm not excited about this being the Borg. It could have been any other enemy and had the same sort of emotional impact, in my opinion, because it doesn't matter who it is. The importance is that it's his son, not that it's an enemy that he was like basically violated by on many different levels, and he's carried this trauma for decades over it. I don't know. I just don't feel like it really works the same way that I think they meant it to. And I'd rather just focus on the goddamn beautiful sequence of Data just like grinning that giant shit-eating grin as he's flying through the Death Star. And it's like, Mwah, chef's kiss. That
I
was
just love
beautiful.
that that's a Borg ship, the too. It's just it feels so natural for me. I know you feel you've stated very well that you feel your feelings about how First Contact was the end of his arc and that, and I get that. But for me, it just comes back to the whole like the finale should be this. This is like again, like I keep saying, the Lex Luthor, the Joker, whatever. Like when Gene Roddenberry made for Star Trek, he made the Klingons the bad guy. That's like their bad guy. And when they were making the Next Generation, they wanted, some people were thinking about bringing the Klingons back, and Gene said no. He said these got to have their own bad guy, and he made the Ferengi at first were sort of set up to be their bad guy, and they made Worf a character, which sort of showed like I'm going on a tangent here, but like when Chekhov was introduced on in season 2 of Star Trek, it was like, whoa, a Russian, a fucking Rusky,
Yeah.
and it was to show like this is how far we've come, and like we are now on the same side. And I feel like that was what making Worf a character was, is like now from there, this is how far we've come, and we're at peace with the Klingons now, so we need a new bad guy. And then of course when later on when they made the swan song for the original cast, that was what became the story, was the end of the conflict with the Klingons, and that was a beautiful swan song
The
and a
Kittimer
good
Accord.
say what?
The Kittimer Accord.
Yeah. So when this, I've just always felt like, what other enemy fucking matters but the Borg? I mean, once they did the Borg in First Contact, it's like, what else you got? Like the Romulans? Fuck the Romulans. Like, and I've
Which
always
they
felt that
tried
this
to
should
do.
actually, yeah. But at any rate, I liked it. And one of the other things I really liked about this was Terry Matalas's writing. I think he wrote the first episode and this episode. Side note, side note, this is only the second entity in all of Trekdom since 1966 that has ever borne the title written and directed by. Do you know that? There was one episode actually in the original
Hmm.
series that had that. It was called Elon of Troyes. I read that today. That was the only episode in all of Trekdom for nearly 60 years that was written and directed by someone.
I mean,
Um,
to be fair, the way they shoot these TV shows is more filmic. So you don't
mhm,
usually have the writing directed by credit because you have staff writers for an
mhm,
ongoing TV series. And that's why you wouldn't normally see that credit on a TV
mhm.
series, especially with directors who tend to be more, I don't want to say freelance, but like you kind of bring them in from outside, with the exception of, Jonathan Frakes directing every episode ever. But um,
Yeah, but no, that's actually what I wanted to touch on because I thought, Terry, I love you. You did a great job writing this episode. Jonathan Frakes should have fucking directed it, um, because just for sentimental reasons alone, like that he's like he became, like you said, like their director. Like he directed when they were making the movies. They got Jonathan. I never understood why he didn't come back to direct Nemesis, or in
yeah.
LeVar Burton's words, that's because it sucked. But um and like it also pissed me off a few years ago when J.J. Abrams left the movie series and they were searching for a new director. And this was the 50th anniversary movie that was coming out in 2016. And Jonathan Frakes sort of raised his hand and was like, I'll do it. And they were like, the Fast and Furious guy. And Jonathan Frakes was like, I'll do it. I'm Jonathan Frakes. Like,
Yeah.
Jonathan, if you're making the 50th anniversary Trek movie and Jonathan Frakes wants to direct it, you let him fucking direct it. Not the Fast and the Furious guy who did an all right job. It's a good movie. But I
I
felt
need
like
to rewatch
Jonathan
that one. I don't
Frakes.
remember it.
Okay. I felt like Jonathan Frakes would have been a great. It would have been a great
I
thing to
mean,
go out on his name directing the movie, whatever
he
show,
directed
whatever.
my favorite movies, so like I'm
So,
all on board for that. So
but anyway, what I really like about Matalas's writing, it was actually kind of like a Whedonish kind of writing, which I know, like I mean, you know how big a fan I am of that. That's what made me love sort of storytelling, was the way that Whedon would write, the way that he would use humor to sort of get you attached to the characters and then do something really serious. But it was, you always became attached because of humor, and there would always be these very organic moments that felt like didn't feel forced. It wasn't like watching the Transformers movies where they just have to throw a dick joke in that totally disrupts the pacing. It just felt like you were becoming closer to the characters through humor. And
and that to me
and
was
it
what the
was great.
threesome moment was the combination
Yeah,
of
I
like
felt that felt
the
forced. I felt that kind of Michael Bayish. Like I don't
But see, I
know.
thought that
Like,
was a perfect Whedon sort of thing, whereas this like unintended double entendre and like Riker immediately being the audience and calling it out, like, do you not hear yourself? But on top of that, like Josh isn't here, he's been busy and whatnot. And I don't think he'd be interested in this, but that's commonly one of his pet peeves and something I butt heads with him about frequently is he hates those moments. He hates when there's that moment of levity after like a serious moment. He was calling it out in Afterlife when like they
okay.
reveal the pit and everything, and all of a sudden podcast makes some sort of joke as like a moment of levity to kind of like break the tension. It's like you need those moments. That's an important part of the ebb and flow of tension. Is if it's constant
Mm,
tension, the tension doesn't have any effect anymore because you're just constantly tense. You need to have that break in tension with the comedy. And as much as I'm loath to give Whedon any sort of credit, that's something he's always done well. Is that use of comedy to break tension or to put you off guard for a shocking moment to follow. Case in point being I'm a leaf on the wind,
yeah.
immediately followed by they put the stake through the wash.
I find it
Um,
interested. Like, I think you might have Josh's number a little bit better than me because I wasn't thinking about that as a characteristic of him. To me, you've said you hate humor, man. You hate humor. You just don't want things to be funny.
no, I just don't think there's certain humor that you don't like and you immediately call it stupid where the like I mean, humor is subjective, but like a lot of the moments that you call stupid, I don't tend to agree with you on, and I tend to like those moments. But um, I agree with you that like I've enjoyed the sort of use of humor in this series, Whedon-esque as it might be, for the purpose of levity and the purpose of kind of, especially with Worf. Worf throughout the series is making all kinds of great little cracks, either making the unknowing double
Swords are fun.
entendre, swords are fun, or him talking about doing meditation and yoga and whatnot. It's like
Mhm.
that's so like such an antithesis for like a Klingon. Or in this episode where he's talking about like I've never wept before, but immediately starts hugging somebody, and it's like it's playing on the character and the sort of like understanding of the character and his history and his species, and like having fun with that, and then like that's good writing. That I will give the show credit for. It's the overall writing that doesn't work
Yeah.
for me, and the plot, and like these are. I should be excited that the Borg are back. Me of all people, the Borg is one of my favorite aspects of this entire franchise. Again, favorite movie of the entire franchise. I should be happy that they're bringing the Borg back to the big bad because they've always been this ever present sort of like threat and whatnot, and this looming sort of shadow. And again, they just sort of limped on stage and were shot in the head and like exit stage left as their bodies dragged away. It's like this was such a lackluster way to end the series for them, and it's like, oh, I don't know. And like we end with like Girardi's like future alternate reality, but in this reality Borg thing, and it's like I don't know what that's supposed to be, and I assume like there's that group of like Borg that um Laura had
Yeah.
corrupted somewhere out there, still somewhere doing whatever the fuck they're doing that we're probably never ever going to go back to. But like, yeah, I feel like they could still bring back the Borg at any point for whatever reason, because how many times have
Yeah.
we killed the Borg Queen and like we
Yeah,
don't
but
know that
that
this is the last
this
ship?
time
And
it's I know, but this time it's thematic. It's the
but we
final
did the thematic
showdown.
one twice. We did it in
But
First
that
Contact when
wasn't
we killed the Borg
final.
Queen.
That wasn't no, that was
It was
never First
thematically
Contact
final.
was never. I'm going to disagree with you hard here. First Contact, and this is my problem actually, kind of with First Contact. One of them is that First Contact was never intimated to be the final showdown with the Borg.
I didn't
They
say it
kill
was
the Borg Queen.
I that's not what I said.
Okay,
They killed the Borg Queen, which is supposed to be the thematic end to Picard's story, is what I'm saying.
but she's not
They
really dead, and we know that. And that because he says to her, "You were on the cube at
but
Wolf three five
they do
nine.
it
That ship got blown up. You're still here." So we there's
but they did the same thing in Voyager where they destroyed the entire like Borg home basically and send a virus throughout the entire Borg collective and whatnot. That was
that's what
supposed
I'm
to be the
saying
end of
is
them
that
as well.
it's that okay, but that wasn't TNG. That my point is that this was the other
But we
times
had closure on the TNG story, is what I'm saying.
but they didn't. It should be just like Star Trek 6 got to be the final where they make peace with the Klingons. We ain't making peace with the Borg. Um,
You say
it
that, but we
should
now
be
have a Borg captain.
it should be that the final Next Generation story is the final Borg story. That's the way it should be. Just like if they ever decide to like conclude the adventures of Superman, the final Superman story should be Superman punching Lex Luthor's head off. And just,
Sure,
I
but Lex
mean,
Luthor doesn't have any legs, doesn't have any arms. He's basically a head in a jar, and Superman punches him. Is that a satisfying
yes,
end to his
to
story?
be fair, in DC did this too. When DC Comics kind of concluded everything and started over in 2011, like their universe ended in 2011, and everything since then has been a total reboot. So it's kind of you can. That's what I love about it. I kind of love that. I kind of we can get into that later. But one of the last things they did was they had an event called Final Crisis where they killed Darkseid, and Darkseid is kind of the sort of end all be all villain of the DC universe. And they were like, that should be the final. Well, it wasn't the final because they had Flashpoint after that. Flashpoint was what did everything. So the final, except for Flashpoint, was the end of Darkseid.
Except that they've
And
started bringing a lot of that stuff back in recent years. And I don't know about Darkseid, but a lot of the stuff that they got rid of at that point has like slowly started coming back, and like
yeah,
the multiverse is back. It's like there's never really an end to these things. And if they want to bring the Borg back, there's all kinds of excuses and abilities for them to do
they
so.
could. I don't think they should. Just like I don't think they should bring Tony Stark back. Like,
But I
not
don't think
saying
they
it
should
will.
have brought it back after First Contact and Voyager. Like to me, those were the
Okay,
ends of
well,
those stories, the end
that's
of the
where we
TNG
part
story
ways.
and the end of the Borg story. That was done.
Let me get into what I really loved about this episode, and that is the way Matalis wrote it. Is that every one of these seven characters has a moment to shine. It's this really interesting thing where they go. And I think the first thing we get is, Beverly with a tactical, because she's the one who
That was
doesn't have
great.
anything there to fucking do. Like she's the medical officer. Unless anyone gets a laser burn, she's the.
Well, that
But
was an episode of TNG that I really enjoyed where she wanted to start doing more things rather than
Mhm,
just learning medical. Like she was starting to learn command, and she would take shifts on the night crew and whatnot. So they'd already
mhm.
established that she was starting to learn these things. And of course, we saw her very early in the season. She's been doing other things for many years now. So like to me, that was a moment earned, and I liked that because it was
Right.
something that wasn't just an ass pull out of nowhere.
Yeah, and so she gets to kick ass, and then actually, maybe I don't know. Did Worf and Riker do much other than just go and hang out with Picard for a while? I don't know. Well, they got to fight the Borg. They're the only ones who actually confront actual Borg besides the Queen. Like you complained last episode that we don't get to see the Borg, and we don't get to see much of them in here. But there's a few drones that they get to hack up,
Yeah, but they're not.
and they get
They're sickly and they're dying, and it's like this isn't the Borg to me.
Geordi gets to command, which I don't know if we've ever
Yeah, that
seen
was
him
great.
do. And then
That
Data
was
has that wonderful
I
moment
did
where
I
he's
did find that weird that he gave command to Geordi when it's like, doesn't Data outrank Geordi? Because he was third in
not even
command.
he's a Commodore now, which is the lowest form of admiral. So I
Okay.
mean, Jordy's a fucking admiral. Yeah, he gets command. And also, yeah. So um, what was I saying? Okay, and then Data gets this moment because his this was a I mean what could have been more amazing for Data's arc? You mentioned a few reviews ago that Brent Spiner kind of wanted out as Data at some point because he felt like they'd taken the character as far as it could go.
Mhm.
No, the
But
farthest he can go is to become human. And now that he is, he actually gets to put that to use. So it's such a wonderful kind of conclusion to his arc
yeah,
that he gets to save his friends by using his gut, which is, I was weeping during that moment when he's like, but
trust
my gut
me.
tells me, say what?
When he said trust me.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Yes, that was very emotional and then very cool, watching the Death Star run. I mean,
And the
there's
shit
so
in
many
him, like he
reasons.
was ear to ear with a grin his entire on
Yeah.
the entire time. I'm like,
And then
yes, Data.
Troy says, "Why do I sense enjoyment?" Again, very Whedon, very very Whedon. Um, and uh, and then okay, and then Troy. Just when you thought everyone's gonna get a moment to shine, but Troy, she's the one. I know where they are, and she goes. beautiful. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I understand the Borg. They could have done better with the Borg. They could have made the Borg a little powerful. Maybe had an episode where they were like, I don't, yeah, because it was kind of, yeah, like you say, Lex Luthor's like the final conversation with Lex Luthor, but Lex Luthor's got his head in a jar. Yeah. Um, so yeah.
But yes,
Um,
that moment you mentioned where she knows where they are, it's the visual of the ship, sort of like the way it flew in, kind of stopped. Like the Enterprise doesn't fly in like that. That doesn't happen, and I don't give a fuck because that was so goddamn cool that I'm there. It's like I keep going back to it. It's the Jaws moment. They've spent like this moment they've earned because like I'm excited, I'm all in for this. I'm loving watching Data fly the ship, a ship that should not be able to maneuver like that. It does not fly like that. I don't care at that point. I'm so excited watching it fly like that and just watching it swoop in from above basically and then beam the people out and like just zip the fuck out of there. And it's like, like give me, why was there not more of that shit in this? Like, because you've got ships that can maneuver like that, and they're just doing the nebula fire, boom, 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 boom. Sorry, the way Star Trek does combat in a lot of these just bores the fuck out of me. Whereas this, it's like this is the shit that gets me excited.
well, the changelings. So here's what I'll end on. The changelings were Deep Space Nine's enemy, and they did have a conclusion with them. Perfect conclusion. That's how they ended the series. So if we get a Star Trek Cisco, it's got to be about something else because we've already like had that.
Isn't he
They
gone though? Like, is he able to come
it's
back?
he is he said in the back in the he says in the finale, I'll be back. I'll be back.
Okay.
Uh, and it's kind of a funny story. I won't get into it now about why they had to change it for him. 'Cause I've heard different things. I've heard that I will get into it now. I've heard that I saw him in person and he said, I viewed that as killing Cisco. And they said, no, we thought you'd be thrilled. We made him a
Yeah.
god.
That was my thing too. Like
And
the way I wasn't a Deep Space Nine guy, but I did watch the finale, and to me that always, to me it felt thematically like this is his, like it's not just him saying goodbye for now. It's like
yeah,
this fucker's
well,
gone. He's done.
yeah, no, he very much says like I will be back. I promise you. And the reason they had to throw that in there at his request is like I've heard that he was just not wanting to be killed off or anything. But I've heard a couple different things, and one of the things was that he felt like because his wife is pregnant at that point, he felt like he was giving into a black stereotype of the black father knocking up someone and then leaving. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really uncomfortable. But I've
Yeah.
heard different things about why that happened. But I was gonna say if they make a Voyager, like again, their bad guy was also kind of the Borg, so whatever. If they make an Enterprise movie or something, like it would be this like the Zinthi or whatever they're called, isn't it? Or the Temporal Cold War, which they never fucking finished. Right? That's kind of yeah. So I'm just trying to think of like who the big rivalries are, like like Jesus and Satan. Uh, yes, the final. There's a movie out there called Omen 3: The Final Conflict, and it's literally about Satan versus Jesus. Um, and there's like Sonic and Robotnik, or Bowser and Mario, or just the great rivalries throughout fiction. You know, uh,
Those are your choices for the great rivalries of fiction. Like
well, I mean, you
Iago and
think of one for
Othello and
that.
like Macbeth and
I'm
or like
amazed that you know that Iago and Othello. We've talked about Othello before, and I didn't think you were that familiar with it. So good
I'm
for
not. I
you.
just know that they're enemies. That's all I know.
Okay.
But like that to me, like or like Moriarty and Sherlock kind
Moriarty
of
and
thing. But like
Holmes. Yeah.
Mario and Bowser is not what I would consider to be like one of
Well,
the,
I'm
like,
trying to think of
it's a
iconic
rivalry I
ones.
like. It's just
Ones
sort of
that
like
everyone knows. So, um, you, you're a beat red right now.
yeah, I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah. So that's all my thoughts, unless you have any extra ones. We like, oh, and the final scene, of course, is amazing, like we said.
Yeah.
So like when, yeah, I was
I
I was
do wish
stirred. I just felt like it was beautiful. Everything came together, and I was like, this is what we should have got 20 years ago. This is to them what Star Trek 6 was to the original cast. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. I love it. Thank you.
And I do appreciate, and it's a much nicer note to go out on than um All Good Things, where it's sort of like they sort of averted like this big disaster, and it like I mean, I guess that one wasn't as fine. What was fine, but like Nemesis was an even harder one to go out on because it's the death of Data, and it's like it's this sour note of them kind of like bittersweet, saying goodbye to a friend and kind of parting ways and whatnot. This is like we've all come together after years of being apart, and we're saying goodbye. So yeah, again, it was like that wonderful ending of Star Trek 6. Sorry, you got me all flustered mentioning like an Enterprise movie, because now I'm just thinking about the possibilities and how much that would excite me to have Enterprise come back. It'll never happen. Nobody but me wants it, but I would be there in a goddamn heartbeat for it. Um, the few thing again, the Q thing was weird. I don't know what they're doing with that. I know it's an opening to something else, and according to you, it's an opening to nothing at this point, but maybe something question mark. But it's like a weird sort of pull because like we gave this like closure to this character and an
I
ending to
know
this
that was weird.
character, and now he's back again, and it's like is nothing permanent. I do wish that I know why Wesley didn't come back, and I know that we got his cameo in this previous season. I do wish, because they were in Guinan's bar, that Guinan had come back at least for that last scene and was like
Mhm.
pouring them drinks or like making quips and whatnot, because I know we keep talking about the family of seven, but Wesley and Guinan to me are like 8 and 9 in that family, and it's like they were just as
PBR.
hmm? Sorry,
Fuck ER.
she was important early on, but like she wasn't
Yeah, I know. No,
she left, so she wasn't there for most of the series. Whereas like I know Wesley was there periodically, but early on he was a very present person within the series. You know, his development as a character was very important to the series. We watched him as a person grow. And I know why he can't be there. I know why Will Wheaton didn't want to be there. Um, Guinan, I feel like we could have at least gotten some closure. And like, sorry, we did get some closure, but like for that final scene, I do feel like she was part of the family. She should have been there, especially since they were in her bar and they name drop her.
yeah,
Like, could
it
they
kind
not
of
have
felt
shot
like
something the previous season
they
when they
just
had
couldn't get
Whoopi
her. They couldn't
Goldberg?
get her to be there. It kind of
But
felt like Whoopi
they
Goldberg
had her
just
last
had a.
season. Like, it didn't they film these like close to back to back?
I know, yeah, but yeah, and also Guinan would have been great to have her get some closure because she hates the Borg more than Picard. They destroyed her homeworld, and she's
That's
the one in the
something
first.
I wish they would actually do a series or like a movie or episode or something about that, because to me that's always been one of the more fascinating mysteries of Star Trek, especially with the Borg, is the relationship between her species and the Borg. And like
Mhm.
they allude to it in Genesis with the Nexus stuff and whatnot, but like I want more of that, and it's fascinating, especially when you introduce the Q into that sort of like trio of like trouble and whatnot. Like there's I don't remember the details of it, but I saw an interesting video about like the dynamic of those three species and like how
Is the one that
important they
says
all are to
Q is
each
afraid,
other.
or the Q is afraid of the Borg, or
Yeah, something to that degree.
yeah.
Um, Again, I don't remember all the details. I'm not going to like try and paraphrase and misquote them or whatnot, but it's a fascinating video. And like I'd like to see more of that, but like at the end of the day, just Guinan in that scene would have been great again, because they shot it back to back. I don't know why they couldn't have just had Whoopi Goldberg shoot one more scene on one day when she was there, or just like shoot her against, you know, a black screen or something where she like just said something and they just like awkwardly cut her in, because, you know, it's never happened before. But just something to include her, because like, and have like a body double sort of like the back of her head or something as she's pouring drinks, just to include her in that scene, because she was always so important to especially their entertainment and whatnot. Um, Again, the Borg it's disappointing to see what they did with the Borg. It was such a late season pull, and I don't know. To me, they still felt out of character. I understand the reasoning for why they were the way they were, but to me, it's so unsatisfying to see this conclusion to the Borg that it's like I'd rather them just left it on First Contact and the way Voyager ended as sort of like the Borg finale and saying goodbye to that. Um, all the little character moments were great. I mean, the character moments throughout the series have been great. Seeing the Enterprise D again was just so lovely. Just it again, it felt like going home. Um, I I know they can't build an entire season on that, but like half the season should have been on that. Like by episode 5, the crew should have been together and they should have been on the Enterprise D and then solving mysteries and trying to figure stuff out. As much as I enjoy the design of the Titan and the look of the Titan, it wasn't their ship. And the fact that they built the entire season on being on the Titan, now the Enterprise G, and then in the last minute pull out this relic, it's like I would have rather than been on the relic for most of this season, especially if this season is built on nostalgia and this being the last hurrah of the crew. I want more than one episode on this. I want an entire half season. I'd want an entire season on it, but I know that's not going to happen. But like so many missed
26
opportunities.
episodes.
I would watch it. I would. I honestly would. Just getting to go home and nostalgia. And I know people complain about nostalgia being, so intrusive in these things. But like to me, it was
right here.
To me, it was the least intrusive part of this series. It's like this series spent so much time just meandering on bullshit plot points that didn't matter, that could have been much more succinctly told. An entire story arc with the changelings, like you said, they'd already finished the story arc of the changelings. As much as they were fascinating villains in this, it's like they have nothing to do with the Enterprise D crew, and really they're just puppets for the Borg. So like thematically, they don't even really do anything story wise. They're a threat, but it's like I don't see, in retrospect, the point of them having come in here. Just make it Borg the entire time. I don't know. Just I love so much about the series, and I really, 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 really want to love it as a whole, but I'm so frustrated and so disappointed with so much of it that even moments like being on the Enterprise D, I was so excited by seeing that I immediately went out and tried to find a background that was this, because I'd been on the TOS Enterprise for so long because I couldn't find a good one. I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna find a shitty one and throw it in the background and blur the hell out of it, just because I want to be on this ship so badly again. And I'm so excited that it's back again. And now it's back in the museum again. And it's like, not that I expected it to be out there more, but it's like just sort of like just a little cock tease where they just slap you in the face a little bit, and it's like, give me more. I want more. God damn it. But yeah, so overall, I'm mostly disappointed. Enjoyed this nostalgia, enjoyed the fun, but this just did not live up to the hype, either by the fans or by what Star Trek itself promised, and I'm just mostly disappointed. So those are my final thoughts.
Well, fuck it, I'm going to end on a positive note.
Which is at a character for us.
I mean, I love that it's the Borg. I love that it's the Enterprise D against the Borg. I love that it's the second Death Star run. I loved all the character moments. I thought, yeah, you're not wrong about the rest of the season. My friend texted me, and I was texting with my friend, and he was like, "Yeah, it's been a really good season. I've loved every episode." And I go, "Really?" I was like, "No, it hasn't." I was like, "Episode 1 was awesome. Episodes 2 through 6 sucked balls. Episode 7 was, or no, episodes 2 through 7 sucked balls. Episode 8 was decent because that's when we finally got the table scene that I've been looking forward to, and 9 and 10 killed it in my mind. And I thought this was, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't have flaws. The kicking a puppy, the Borg being a sick puppy, I'm with you. I wish there could have been something a little bit more. I mean, yeah, they kind of have to be that weak because they are going up against the Enterprise D alone against the Borg cube, which so they have to be depowered, but not to that extent. There could have been a middle ground. But overall, I don't like that they're working off of the Voyager thing. Like, it feels like I want there to be a TNG versus Borg saga, and this is kind of a trilogy when you think about it. You wanted it to end with 2 because it's best. Hugh is like the Hobbit, and then the trilogy is Best of Both Worlds, First Contact, and this. They've invaded the Federation 3 times, and they've gotten their asses kicked all 3 times. And this time they at least tried something different. But I really thought it was awesome, and I really love this season, and I love the writing, and I'm going to keep an eye on Terry Matalas. Maybe we'll be back here watching Star Trek Legacy, the next generation. So that'll do us for today. A shift change. I liked it. James didn't. It's opposite day. And until there's like, share.
I'd said for a while I wanted to see the movie or show that Ryan would give like an 8 out of 10 on. So this I
Yeah.
think we aren't giving scores on this because I actually don't like giving scores. Because like it becomes a metric of like, well, you compared you made this one a 9 and you made this one a 10, but you made this one a 7, and it's like, where's your scale for it? And it's just sort of like most of these I'm just scoring on a
True.
whim of like how I feel, but like to me this is the closest I've gotten on while I've been on this show with you
Yeah.
to you scoring an 8 or 9. So
Yeah,
I'm
James
gonna count
has
it.
said, like I said, he's like, I never, since I've been on the show, you haven't really loved anything. And I was like, well, I like such and such. And he's like, no, I want to see things that blow you away.
Yeah.
And this kind of blew me away. That speech I gave at the beginning was what James has been waiting for. So in a way, this really gave us both what we were looking for. And on that note, folks, thank you for joining us. I'm Ryan Murphy,
And I'm James Sheridan
and thank you for keeping it real.
with Real Time. Say it.
Say it with me.
Engage.
Engage.